Thing. Wonderful to have everyone here. We are still waiting on one. I have not heard from Miriam, who will be joining us shortly, God willing. And I'm sure she is on her way. And we understand that sometimes life makes it difficult to be at a certain place at a certain time. It's not always easy. I say this recognizing that I have a child on the way, and soon I will be subject to the same forces as everyone else who has kids.
What my puppy does to me.
Today, now something, hold on, something is still wrong here. How do I stop the presentation? Slideshow? No. Okay. Well, that's not quite what I wanted to do either. I'm trying to share my screen for those of you who... I'm going to ask you to open up your email. Maybe that'll be a lot faster. To view the course overview. Maybe I can share... Hold on, maybe I can share it more directly with those of you who are on Discord. Let me try something else for those of you that are on Discord. If I can share it directly, here we go. Let's try this. Okay. Don't worry about finding the email. It should be up on your screen now if you're on Discord. You should see it as a window next to other people.
Yes, it says watch screen.
Excellent. So as you're watching that, my video is frozen for some reason. I think it's more than this poor computer can handle. You've got starting. So last week I mentioned that we went over a basic overview of the course and the requirements. This is the schedule. One of the decisions of last week's attendees was to have a more condensed structure so that our lessons might be a little longer. But we will finish the course basically by the end of January is what it looks like. So this week we're going to discuss what is Judaism and what do Jews believe, as well as Jewish denominations. Most for anybody, which I guess is just Chris, who took the class last year, most of the sessions are actually double sessions. So we'll move quickly. We'll still have time for questions again. Next week, we'll start talking about mitzvah confirmation, long learning, as well as Jewish texts. You can follow this all the way through. I've marked the weeks where we will not have any class. We will have class Monday for Thanksgiving. I do have scheduled the Monday after Thanksgiving. Give this a scroll down. This is really going slow. The If you're writing your summaries, uh, you can write up to 2 pages, but not more. If you only write one page, a full page typed for each session, that's all right. The purpose of the summaries is to assess a basic understanding, as we talked about last week. And the summaries are only required for those of you who are taking the course as part of your requirements for conversion. If you are taking the course just to learn about Judaism, you are welcome to do homework. Writing a summary of the chapters that you read each week will be helpful to you, but is not required to understand what's happening in the course. There are a couple of different books, and I'll actually mention those when we get to the bottom, what these 4 columns are with the different page numbers and chapter numbers. These pieces are um, the readings for each week, which I recommend reading before you come to class. You should read and review before coming to class each of these readings. Obviously, this week is an exception because you're just seeing it now. We will not have class. We'll have class every Monday except for the Monday before Thanksgiving, the Monday before New Year, that's December 27th, and on Tu B'Shvat, which happens to fall on a Monday this year, we'll probably have a temple celebration that week, which is January 17th. We will not have class that Monday. All of this is subject to change, so be sure to check the weekly emails for any updates or changes. On the last page, and again, you have this in the email, you should see a very important asterisk, schedule subject to change, like I said. Please see weekly emails for updates. That also sounds familiar. All classes may run later than the scheduled time to accommodate questions and discussion. Classes are scheduled from 6:30 until 8 p.m. I would plan, especially if you have kids at home, you might not be finished until 8:30. Uh, Attendance is required at all courses. If you are converting, if you know that you will miss a session, contact me in advance and we will discuss the best way to make up that particular session. There are no excused sessions. Every single session, because they are combined, is vital. So if you are studying for conversion, uh, you'll need one way or another 100% attendance. If you can't physically be here at the scheduled time, then let me know in advance, except of course in an emergency, I understand. Otherwise, let me know that you might not make it on a particular week, and we will find a way to make up the content. As you look over the schedule between this week and next week, I'm going to close this now. As you look over the schedule between this week and next week in your email, do let me know if there are any sessions that you have a scheduling conflict, and we can always reschedule. We're a pretty small class this year, so it will always be possible to adapt, or reschedule as needed. Any questions so far? All right. Then let's begin with what hopefully is now on your screen next to my face. What is a Jew and what do we believe? If you click on my face, you can also make my screen a little bit bigger on your screen.
Thank you.
You should be able to read what's next to me here. This is important. So to begin with, what is Judaism? This is not so simple a question as you might initially think. There is not one simple, straightforward answer for this. Judaism originated as a nationality or a peoplehood. It was the Jewish people or the Hebrew people before it became the Jewish religion. Judaism is also an ethnicity or a heritage. We talk about Jewish foods. We talk about Jewish humor. We talk about Jewish language like Hebrew or Yiddish or Ladino. We talk about Jewish customs or Jewish superstitions. These are things that are attached to ethnicity and heritage more so than just a religion or just a nationality. Judaism is also described as a way of life. You could say any one of these things describes Judaism. You could say all of these describe Judaism. There's a word that I sometimes like to use that I feel best captures what Judaism is all about. And I don't remember if it's coming up later in the presentation. So I'll tell you now, spoiler alert. There is a word that encompasses all of these things, which is the word tribe. And in fact, if you talk to Jews of a certain age, you hear them describe members of the tribe, talking about other Jewish folks in their lives. This was very common. My granddad would say, "Oh, is he a member of the tribe? Are you a member of the tribe?" That's Sandy Koufax. He's a member of the tribe. Let's talk about these individually. What does it mean to say that Judaism is a nationality or a peoplehood? Well, we are a nationality because we share a story of national origin. That is one of the key features of any nationality. The story of our origin is the Torah. We started with Abraham. We went from Abraham and Sarah's family. We grew into a nation. We went down to Egypt where we were enslaved, and we left Egypt to receive the Torah and form our own land, our own people, with our own borders, customs, language. We are tied to a land. This is one of those features that describes a nationality Most national groups, I think every nation, has some type of tie to a particular land. Ours, of course, is the land of Israel. We have a system of legal and decision making structures that's found in the Torah, that we have ways to organize our communities, and certainly the state of Israel has its own legal system. But these are built into Judaism, and in fact, the legal system of the state of Israel is in part based on the teachings of the Torah. We also have shared national literature, music, art, etc. When we talk about Chagall, Marc Chagall made the famous stained glass windows and many other uh, uh, artworks. When we talk about uh, 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 Martin Buber, or when we talk about um, Isaac Bashevis Singer, when we talk about Fiddler on the Roof, which is based on one of his stories. These are not religious books, but they are a part of our national identity and our national culture. We have cultural institutions as Jews, such as the World Zionist Organization, Jewish community centers, Jewish National Fund. These are cultural institutions. They have no religious significance. Their purpose is to preserve and protect Jewish culture. And of course, we have the nation of Israel, which is the national identity of the state of Israel. When we talk about the difference between a nation and a state, I know we're getting into splitting some hairs. There's an important philosophical difference that's beyond the scope of this course. But let's move on and talk about Judaism as a religion. How can you say that Judaism is, in fact, a religion? Well, Judaism professes a particular belief in a God or divine being. We have holy texts and teachings. We have a system of revelation. We have prophets. We have faith leaders like myself. I'm a rabbi not because of my legal authority or because of my cultural appointment, although those are important parts of my work. I'm fundamentally a faith leader, just like every religion has faith, or I shouldn't say every. Most religions are marked by faith leaders. I say most, the Amish or Friends, not the Amish, Quakers. Maybe also the Amish don't have, I don't think there are Amish priests. So the Amish, Quakers, you have religions with no figureheads, no faith leaders, but that's another characteristic of religion. Most or all religions, including Judaism, have a belief system and a creed. You notice I put an S on the end here, creeds, because there is not a single creed of Judaism. The closest thing maybe that we have is the Shema, but in reality, there is no one creed that you can say this is what every Jew believes. We have prayers, we have holy days, we have rituals. And Judaism is exclusionary or distinctive, maybe is a better word, to other faiths. There's a difference between Judaism and Christianity. There's a difference between Judaism and Hinduism. There's a difference between Judaism and any other faith, uh, which are distinctive and mutually exclusive. Judaism is also an ethnic heritage. As I alluded to, we have unique languages. Hebrew is the language of the Jewish people. There is no other group of people in the world that speaks Hebrew. It is a language which is distinctive to us. It is a language which has been a distinctive part of the Jewish people for as long as there has been a Jewish people. The formation of the Hebrew language is debatably the beginning of the Jewish ethnic group. We have Jewish foods. Whether you talk about uh, indisputably Jewish foods like matzah or matzo ball soup, uh, or you're talking about foods which are distinctively Jewish, like bagels, which were emerged out of Jewish communities in America, in New York specifically, that these are part of an ethnic heritage, some of them which are connected with our history. Why do we have cholent? Do you know what cholent is? Cholent, which is like a stewed meat. Many cultures have stewed meats. The development of cholent, of this, meat stew, or you, well, it's not really, it's in between like a plate and a stew, I guess, that emerged because you can't start cooking something during Shabbat. So if you wanted to celebrate Shabbat, you would use a slow cooker, or in the times before crock pots, you would have a low fire that would run through the night, and you would have a hot meal for Shabbat afternoon. That was the only way to do it. So the food is connected with Jewish traditions, but it is its own thing. We have common cultural experiences. We talk about having a Jewish mother or a Jewish grandmother. We talk about Jewish humor. Certain parts of Jewish identity that are shared cultural experiences of just being Jewish in the world. We talk about the December dilemma when we reach this time of year, and we have to make decisions about how and how much we are going to engage with secular and Christian uh, 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 cultural hegemony, which is surrounding us, on all sides, and we make decisions about how we're going to participate in the Christmas pageant at the kids' school, or the downtown parade, the South Pole parade. We have a Jewish float in the parade. I don't know if you know that. Our synagogue has a float. We do. In the Christmas parade. We do. Um, which actually I need to call and find out what's going on with that, because they're probably already planning it. So these are the types of things that are part of an ethnicity. We share a common identity, meaning, to put it more simply, we feel proud when one of our own does well. Oh, did you hear about, Julian Edelman just won a Super Bowl a couple of years ago, and he's Jewish. And we feel ashamed when one of our own does bad. We don't like to talk about, the I've blocked out his name. The uh who was the one who ran that Ponzi scheme a few years ago? Who turned out to be Jewish. Um, we don't like to talk about the Harvey Weinsteins. There's another example. We feel bad that a Jewish person has done something bad. That's part of a common identity that we share as an ethnic group. We share genetic commonalities and common ancestry. numerous studies have been done on uh, uh, Jewish genetics that, number one, identify uniquely Jewish genetic markers that are unique to Jewish communities, and also identify common markers across Jewish communities. Uh, Sephardic Jews and Hispanic crypto Jews, as well as Ashkenazi Jews, as well as Persian Jews, Jews who've been from all over different parts of the world, share common genetic traits. Does this mean that every single Jew has these same genetic markers? No, of course not. That's actually not how genetic works for anybody. You couldn't say every Irish person has certain genetic markers either, but they tend to be common among groups of Jews. And we have traditional music, dance, humor, etc. Klezmer music is not religious music. Do you know what klezmer is?
Yes.
If
My
not,
dad plays it.
Klesmer. It's a lot of fiddle and clarinet. It's a lot of fun. Go and listen to it. Uh, Klezmer music is not religious music, generally speaking, uh, but it is something that is distinctive to Jews as an ethnic group. You could also say that Judaism is a way of life or a practice because there is a distinctive Jewish system of values. We'll talk throughout the course about what makes certain Jewish values or the perspective of Jewish values or the approach to certain values different from other value systems. There are Jewish dietary practices, which, if you are Jewish, you take into account when you eat. There are many Jews that specifically do not eat pork. There are many Jews that go out of their way to eat pork. But it's all a response to the practice or the way of life that has its foundation in Judaism. We have a daily and weekly schedule when you talk about Judaism as a way of life, Judaism as a practice. Going even more in depth, we have a system called Musar. Musar, which is not covered in this course, but hopefully in time it will be. It will be considered a standard fundamental component of Judaism. I think it is. I think it should be. But it remains, at least today, a more what's the word, niche or uh, not fringe, but more specialized field of study in Judaism. We will not talk or we will not learn Musar, but we will learn about Musar, which I translate as spiritual discipline. This is a set of practices that help to develop that system of values, help to develop one's own spiritual well-being, help to develop one's Jewish life, and basically being a mensch, how to be a better version of you, how to be a better person. You could also say Judaism is all or none of the above. All of these, as I mentioned, I had a spoiler alert. Fit under the umbrella term of tribe. Think of any tribe that you're familiar with. If you meet someone who's, I moved here, I don't know what the local Native American tribes in this region are. I moved here from Florida where there are a lot of Seminole Indians. If you ask, what is the nationality of someone who's Seminole? They're Seminole. That's their nationality. What is their religion? The Seminole religion. That's their religion. What is their ethnicity? What is their way of life? All of these things fall under the broad term of tribe. It used to be a very common word in Jewish circles. Uh, it fell out of use. I think that it was seen as just out of step with the times, an old-fashioned term maybe. Uh, but I think we should bring it back.
When I told my dad I was taking the class, that
Yeah.
was the first thing he said. You're going to become a member of the tribe?
You're going to be a member of the tribe. Exactly, exactly. Now, who decides who is a Jew? This is a sub-question underneath the larger question of what is a Jew. Who gets to decide who is a Jew? Well, there's one answer that comes from traditional halakha. That answer is that you are Jewish if you are either born to a Jewish mother or you convert. Under Jewish halakha, you cannot un-Jew. Once you're Jewish forever. If you're born Jewish, it doesn't matter what you do in your life, you will never not be a Jew. You can convert to Christianity, you can become a priest, and there are many instances in history where this has happened. And people will say, you're a bad Jew, you might be an apostate Jew, but you're never not a Jew. The same thing applies to someone who converts. If somebody is a spiritual seeker, I think we've all met people who every 3 years, every 5 years, they have a new spiritual vision, a new path in life. They say, now I'm Buddhist, now I'm Mormon. 5 years later, now I'm Scientologist. I don't know. Spiritual seekers who are constantly finding new paths. Even if somebody converts to Judaism and later finds another path in their life, they are still Jewish. That's part of the tremendous commitment that comes with conversion, that it is a permanent and a lifelong thing. Once you're Jewish, you can never un-Jew. That is not the only answer, however. We also have modern halakha. We find this particularly in the Reform movement, but not exclusively in the Reform movement. In modern halakha, you're considered Jewish if you are born to a Jewish parent, if you're raised in a Jewish household, or if you practice Judaism exclusively. Okay, I think that was Miriam. I'm not sure. I'm going to take a minute and see if she's outside and she's trying to get in. Hold that thought. she went. Okay. I sent her a message to come in the front door. I hope she gets it. There's also another answer in the state of Israel. Who is considered Jewish by the state of Israel? This is significant because it is a matter of legal status in Israel. Who is eligible for the right of return? Meaning, if you are Jewish, you are automatically approved or pre-approved, so to speak, for Israeli citizenship. You can become a citizen of the state of Israel if you are Jewish. This was originally based on refugee status. Sounds like somebody's coming, I hope. This was originally based on Jewish refugees.
Hello.
Hello. Come on in. Come on in.
Sorry for my delay.
That's all right. That's all right. I'm going to keep going now.
I forgot that. Oh. I didn't bring anything to take a note. Oh. I remember Oh, yes. I always remember things better when I write them down.
I feel the same way. I can also send you these slides.
Please do remove it.
Yeah.
Please do remove it.
I can send you these slides. And for those of you who are joining on Discord, let me know. Send me an email if you would like slides from any of the classes that you've attended. Most of these classes, all of the classes, by the way, are recorded. I think that I've mentioned that. And most of the classes are available from previous years or will be available for this year online on YouTube after they're recorded. So according to the state of Israel, you are Jewish if you are halachically Jewish. See the traditional halacha above, or the modern reform halacha.
What is halakha?
Halacha is the Jewish system of laws and rules.
Oh.
I'm sorry if you said something I didn't hear you on Discord. You can't see me. Uh-oh. Okay, can you see me now? Okay. Were you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure what happened there. I think this computer got a little bit overwhelmed with recording and sharing the video and running. Everything that you see over here is also on a giant physical screen behind me, and I think my computer is not powerful enough to run the screen. I don't know. Until they make a computer that can do all of this. That's what we've got. So in the state of Israel, you are Jewish according to the law of return. This is the Jewish determination, right? If you are halachically Jewish, or if you have one or more Jewish grandparents, or if you have converted in a recognized synagogue. And there is a very famous case of a Franciscan friar who claimed citizenship under the law of return because he had a Jewish grandparent. You cannot be practicing another religion other than Judaism.
Not practicing or not have practiced.
Practicing. This was the famous case, and I'm forgetting his name. If you look up, law of return priest, you'll get. It's a famous landmark case that went to the Israeli Supreme Court, where this was a Franciscan, priest, monk, who applied under the law of return, said one of my grandparents is Jewish. Excuse me. One of my grandparents is Jewish, and I should qualify as a Jew in the state of Israel. And it went to the Supreme Court, and they said, no, you cannot be a Catholic priest and a Jew at the same time, according to the state of Israel. Can only be one or the other. Now, when I say halachically Jewish, this is significant because it is not necessarily have to be according to traditional halakha. There are multiple systems of halakha that exist in Judaism today. In reality, there have nearly always been multiple systems of halakha. Halakha literally means the way. These are the Jewish rules or laws, or the system of rules and laws. Somebody who is considered halachically Jewish by their Reform congregation or by their conservative congregation will seek documentation from their Reform or conservative movement in the state of Israel, where they will have a letter or a certification from their congregation wherever they are in the world, or from the congregation in Israel that states, yes, this person is Jewish, they're a member of our community.
So, for example, that will be my case, for example. Yeah, halachically Jews will be my case to be Jewish because,
yes,
because the system or the synagogue give me a document certificate. Okay.
Correct, according to the state of Israel.
It's an example, that's it.
Yes. That doesn't necessarily, and we'll talk as we're talking about conversion, and you have undoubtedly encountered this before, but conversion is not, no conversion is universally recognized. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about what that means in a practical sense in the future. Is somebody calling the temple? Mm-hmm. All right. It's supposed to go straight to voicemail. I don't know. Yeah, we get so many spam calls. All right. I have yet another answer to this question. Who decides who is a Jew? And this is my answer if somebody asks, how do I know if I'm Jewish? Or how do I know if somebody is Jewish? And my answer is this. All of the official status issues aside, which are not insignificant, it is important to have formal status. But at the end of the day, either you stood at Sinai or you didn't. Either your soul was there when the Torah came down in the hands of Moses, or you weren't. There is a Jewish teaching that every single Jewish soul stood at Sinai, and that's what is meant when Moses says, Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem, you stand this day, all of you, before Adonai your God. As Moses was coming down, carrying the tablets, one in each hand, as we picture, probably if you're, of a certain age, you're probably picturing Charlton Heston. Younger kids probably picture the cartoon. Moses coming down, carrying the tablets, and speaking to the Jewish people. There's a teaching that every Jewish soul that would ever exist stood there that day. And if your soul was there, then you're Jewish. Doesn't matter what I say, doesn't matter what the state of Israel says. You know and God knows. Our purpose here, other than, learning, the education, all of those very important things as well, the spiritual guidance on your journey where you are and where you're headed. Our purpose here is a matter of formal status. It's not a matter of determining, that I make the determination you're Jewish or you're not Jewish. Moving right along to basic Jewish beliefs. There is one God, Adonai Echad. And in Judaism, there is no room for Gnosticism, meaning there's no anti-God. There's no counterpart of God in the universe. You find this in Gnostic religions, such as many forms of Christianity that have God on one side and Satan or the devil on the other side, these two, the good and the evil forces balancing and fighting against one another. That does not exist in Judaism. There is only one force in Jewish belief. There's only one God, and everything, all good, all evil, everything in existence is under the domain of that one God. Exactly. Just like the Shema. There is one life. Afterlife is not part of the Jewish creed. Judaism is focused on what you should do, think, behave, believe in this life, in this present moment. It's not saying there is no Jewish belief in the afterlife. We'll talk about that in another class, what those different Jewish beliefs are, and why there is not just one belief. But it is fundamentally, Judaism is focused on the present life. Question?
Yes. I'm trying to understand that concept. Can you explain it in other words? I don't know if it's
Yes.
of my English, or I am trying to understand the concept.
There are some religions, most forms of Christianity, most forms of Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism. There are many religions where the fundamental question, or one of the fundamental questions of the religion, is what happens to me after I die?
Como que se enfocan más en lo que va a pasar en el futuro. Lo que haces ahorita es para algo más allá, pero en esto es como que lo que es importante es lo que hacemos hoy, ahorita, aquí.
Does that help?
Yes. And what is the
My Spanish is not so good.
Como lo que like the belief.
Como tu
Ay.
credo.
Mi credo.
Ay, mi credo.
Yeah, credo. Exactly. Exactamente.
You have to learn Spanish or about?
Sí, aprendiendo, pero no fácil. No es fácil. Nada. Pero aprendiendo.
Slowly, slowly.
Despacio, despacio, sí. Despacito. Exactamente. Basic Jewish beliefs include belief in the Torah. The Torah is the central text of Judaism, whatever your perspective on Judaism and the Torah is. For many Jews, the Torah is the complete, precise, immutable, perfect word of God, dictated directly to Moses and written down exactly as dictated. For other Jews, the Torah has a more complicated history of how it came to be in its present form, but nevertheless is the central system of ethics and teachings and beliefs that make up the Jewish being who we are.
So some see it as more concrete and others more abstract, more figurative, but still a
Yes.
guideline of or rules.
Yes. To put it another way, a little bit more simply, all Jews believe that the Torah came from God. Different Jews have different perspectives on what that means or what that process looked like.
Like in our daily lives.
Did it literally, the text of the Torah, did God dictate it to Moses? Or did it come about through inspiration, through study, through there's a range of beliefs about the Torah in Judaism, but there are no groups of Jews that reject the Torah or that don't believe that the Torah is fundamental.
It's universal for all the Jews.
Exactly. "613 mitzvot. These are the Jewish commandments. Basic Jewish beliefs: what you say and what you do matters to God. I think that one's self-explanatory. Basic Jewish beliefs include the significance of prayer and holidays over the course of the year, shared Jewish values like teshuvah, repentance, or tzedakah. Tzedakah, tefillah is prayer. Tzedakah, charity. That's the word I was looking for. How do you translate tzedakah? Charity is a close translation of tzedakah. We'll talk more about that as well. Yeah. Synagogue and home. What is the center of Judaism? What place is the center of Jewish life? You could say the synagogue is the center of Jewish life. You could just as easily say the home is the center of Jewish life. And you would be equally correct. This is a passage from the Talmud, Elu Devarim. This is also part of our daily prayer. These are things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world, while the principle remains in the world to come. This is a statement. I said there's no Jewish creed. This might be one example of an attempt at a Jewish creed. They are honoring one's father and mother, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study, morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer, and making peace among people. But the study of Torah encompasses them all. Here's another statement that might be taken as a creed. Al Shlosha Devarim. This is also part of our service every week when we take out the Torah. We sing Al Shlosha Devarim. Simon the Just, used to say, the world stands upon three things: the Torah, the service, and acts of loving kindness. Al ha-Torah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim. In the Talmud, we read, our rabbis taught, deeds of loving kindness are superior to charity in three respects. Charity can be accomplished only with money. Deeds of loving kindness can be accomplished through personal involvement as well as with money. Charity can be given only to the poor. Deeds of loving kindness can be done for both rich and poor. Charity applies only to the living. Deeds of loving kindness apply to both the living and the dead. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip over Maimonides' ladder of tzedakah. These are all different attempts in Jewish text to form some fundamental creed, some simple statement to sum up the basis of Judaism. And you see how they are all so different from one another. The one that I will conclude this section of the class, this topic, is once there was a Gentile who came before Shammai, who was one of the two main rabbis of his day, Shammai and Hillel. First he went to Shammai and said, convert me on the condition that you teach me the entire Torah while standing on one foot. Shammai chased him off with a stick that he was holding. Get out of here. Get out of here. I'm just saying, get out of here. I don't want to hear your nonsense. Teach me the entire Torah while standing on one foot. The same fellow came before Hillel, and Hillel converted him immediately, saying, presumably while he stood on one foot, that which is despicable to you, do not do to your fellow. This is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Now go and learn it. All the rest is commentary. Now we'll see if this works. All right, we've got it in. We've got the next part of the class in person, but we don't have it for those who are joining us virtually. Let me see if I can fix that. Hey, there we go. You should now be able to see Jewish organizations and denominations next to my face. How do we make sense of all of these different pieces of Jewish life and the way that they come together? What are the basic organizations in Jewish life? Certainly, we would start with synagogues. We're sitting in a synagogue right now. The word synagogue is actually a Greek word, synagoge, which means a gathering place. The Hebrew word for synagogue is a translation, a literal translation of gathering place, which is Bet HaKnesset. Throughout history, synagogues have had a dual role as a religious center, like a church or a mosque, as well as a community center. There are also Jewish federations. Most cities have a Jewish federation, if there's a large Jewish population, which is separate from any of the synagogues. We do not have a Jewish federation here in McAllen or here in the Valley. As our community grows, maybe one day we will. The Jewish Federation is can vary in each city, but generally is a joint venture of all of the different Jewish communities, all the different synagogues, all of the different Jewish groups who come together in some common mission. Sometimes that common mission includes JCCs, the Jewish Community Center. A Jewish community center can take on a lot of different forms. It could be a very similar to a synagogue. It could be a place where services are held, religious services. It could be a place where classes and Sunday school and things like that are held. It could be something almost entirely secular, an event space or a gym.
That type of thing, like a Boys and Girls Club.
Like a Boys and Girls Club. I'm guessing that's like a YMCA.
Something like that, yeah.
Similar idea. And any city that you go to, you'll see somewhere within that range. Either something that is totally Jewish in character or something that is, has some sort of Jewish character but is almost entirely secular. Some JCCs you go to and it's just like a gym, and it's, there's a swimming pool and workout and fitness classes, arts and crafts, and you might have a lot of difficulty figuring out what's Jewish about it other than it's sort of operated by the Jewish community. Auxiliary organizations. Most synagogues, but also sometimes JCCs or federations will have auxiliary organizations such as our sisterhood. That could also include our youth group, which hopefully will be starting this year. That also includes, how about a Sunday school? Auxiliaries could be a brotherhood or men's club. It could be organizations like we have Hadassah, which is an independent organization that is connected with the Jewish community but operates on its own. That's a women's organization advocating for Israel. You could be B'nai B'rith, which was a men's club. You don't hear much from them anymore. It used to be, in earlier times, B'nai B'rith was the premier Jewish men's organization. I mentioned Sunday school, but what about day schools or preschools? Many Jewish communities operate day schools so that kids can have a Jewish education, learn Hebrew, learn prayers, learn all of the things, learn halakha, learn all of the things that take a lifetime to learn. You can start learning, as soon as you're born, and in a formal education. Tikkun Olam organizations. There are Jewish, Tikkun Olam literally means repairing the world. It's a literal translation. These are community service organizations. There is, my sister volunteered years ago with American Jewish World Service, AJWS, which at that time was focused on direct service. They sent volunteers all over the world to different communities to help improve the lives of the people there. Something akin to like a Peace Corps. Do you know the Peace Corps?
No.
¿Cómo se dice?
Es una organización que va a diferentes lugares en el mundo para ayudar. Algo como Doctores Sin Fronteras o como para ayudar a algo en el mundo.
O
algo
como
mundial.
misioneros que van en el mundo
Sí,
haciendo.
sí, pero específicamente judíos.
Perfect. Doctors Without Borders. There's also a Jewish group, the Maimonides Foundation, Maimonides something. There's a Jewish group named after Maimonides, who was, in addition to being a great rabbi, also a physician, who was a doctor. And there is a Doctors Without Borders type of program where Jewish doctors go to different places to provide medical help to people who might not have access to doctors. These are not religious organizations. They don't profess any specific faith related to Judaism, but they are certainly Jewish in their character. Political advocacy organizations. You have groups that have a particular political cause that might not be connected with Judaism. I'm speaking tomorrow evening for a group in Washington, D.C., remotely, of course. I'm getting on a plane right now. Tomorrow evening, I'm speaking for a group in Washington, D.C. It's organized by HIAS, HIAS, which used to stand for the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. This was a group that 50 or 60 years ago was bringing Jewish immigrants from oppressive places, mostly from Soviet Union, but also other places in the world, where Jews were trying to escape, trying to get to the United States. So this was an organization which was designed to help immigrants coming to the United States, and even 100 years ago, well before there was the Soviet Union, Jews coming from different disadvantaged places trying to start a new life. The organization now that most Jewish immigrants have found the land where they want to raise their children. You don't have many populations of Jews in the world at this moment that are trying to escape and go somewhere else. Most of those Jews who are trying to get out of Europe came to America, went to Israel. Jews who are trying to get out of Iran, escaped to Israel or to California. Jews who are trying to get out of, Russia have escaped to Israel or wherever. The Jews that are still in Russia are there because they want to be. The Jews that are still in Iran are there because they want to be. Believe it or not, there are still Jews in Iran, and they're perfectly happy staying there. You may have heard recently about the last Jew in Afghanistan who just weeks ago left Afghanistan. There was one Jew left for decades, and he was very happy living there. It actually took a couple of tries to get him out, not because the Taliban stopped him from leaving, but because he didn't want to leave. He said, "No, I'm happy here." So the Taliban's in charge. That's life. I've gotten way off track. HIAS is an organization that now helps immigrants to this country in a lot of different ways and deals with immigrant issues. That's a political advocacy organization. They're interested in policy. There are APAC, the American Israel Public Awareness Campaign, I think is what it stands for, which is an organization that advocates for the relationship between the United States and Israel. It's a political advocacy organization. These are organizations which may or may not be explicitly Jewish in character. They may or may not be advocating for explicitly Jewish issues, but they are part of the spectrum of Jewish organizations that are out there.
Do they sometimes contradict each other?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You've got the uh, um, I'm trying to think of an example. Yeah, there are definitely organizations, Jewish organizations, political advocacy organizations that are on opposite ends of the same political issues, and they may have very good reasons for doing so. Um, it's hard to think of a Jewish organization that does political advocacy that you couldn't think of another whatever the issue is, that you couldn't think of a Jewish organization that's also working, has a completely different take on the same issue.
Which is inherently Jewish.
Which is inherently Jewish, as you say. Even if you're talking about Israel, believe it or not, there are Jewish organizations that say, I would argue that they're not very Jewish, but that's an opinion. It's not a statement of fact. As a statement of fact, objectively, Jewish organizations that advocate against policy helping to strengthen the state of Israel, for reasons which I don't think we'll get into in this class. But even something that you would think would be so easily universal, you could find Jewish organizations somewhere out there. Financial organizations. The Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society was originally, which I mentioned before, was originally a financial organization which provided financial support to Hebrew immigrants. That was what made it an aid society, as well as food and housing and logistics and other things. You have organizations like the Jewish Foundation in many cities, which is a way of funding different Jewish projects. You have they might fund schools, they might fund community improvement projects, they might fund youth activities, they might fund the JCC. You've got Israel bonds, which are government bonds issued by, or I don't know if they're issued by the state of Israel, but it's a relationship. So there are different ways that you can, financial organizations that are part of the broader Jewish communal structure. And you have engagement organizations, which are specifically oriented towards engaging Jews in Jewish life. You have organizations like, I'm trying to think of what my examples were.
Partnership.
What's that?
It's a partnership. It's a organization that has partnerships with other communities.
It's like getting people involved, right?
Yeah.
Getting them to come.
So, many groups have engagement activities. We have things that in the temple that are to get people engaged. I'm trying to think of yeah. So there are organizations that only do those types of activities. And I don't know why I'm drawing a blank right now on an example of that. These are only some of the types of Jewish organizations that are out there. As you can see, Jewish life is a broad tapestry of different intersecting parts of life, and that's reflected in the number and type of Jewish organizations that are out there to be involved with. Now let's talk about Jewish denominations. I'm going to teach you about Jewish denominations in two different ways. First, I'm going to teach you the way that it's always taught, which in my opinion is the wrong way. Then I'll teach you the Rabbi Farb way, which is correct. So you will see Jewish denominations described in this way. Judaism in the United States is Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. You've heard this before. These are the three denominations. That's so wrong. Totally wrong. Because it leaves out a lot of different Jewish denominations, like Reconstructionist, Renewal, Chabad, non-denominational, trans-denominational, egalitarian Orthodox, humanistic Judaism, open Orthodoxy, Haredi, and on and on and on and on and on. These are all different denominations of Judaism that exist in America. 50 years ago, it was probably safe to say that 99% of Jews in the United States identified with one of these three: Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox. The modern Jewish life simply does not line up this nice in these three groups anymore. But the good news is you don't have to learn what all of these things are right now. Over time, it would be a good idea. Hold on, I've got an answer. Somebody is trying to call me. Let him know I'll call back later. All right. Although it would be a good idea to learn a little bit about all of these, right now you don't have to learn the differences between all of these different forms of Judaism, because it's really much simpler than that. Take your paper if you're taking notes, draw a line down the middle, and every form of Judaism is going to fall on one side or the other. It's either heterodox or it's orthodox. Orthodox Judaism, you're probably familiar with this term. Heterodox just means the opposite of orthodox. I used to call this, and you'll hear this category called progressive Judaism or liberal Judaism. I used to use these terms, but they're so politicized now that they're very confusing. For example, one form of progressive Judaism, one form of liberal Judaism, is conservative Judaism, which these words with all of their political baggage, that as soon as I say progressive or liberal or conservative, you have these associations that have nothing to do with what we're talking about Jewishly. Sometimes heterodox is also referred to as egalitarian Judaism, although that is a bit of a misnomer as well. Heterodox, I think, is the best term that I've found, even if it's a little bit awkward. Mm-hmm. So this includes Reform Judaism. I am a Reform rabbi. We're sitting in a Reform temple. I was ordained from a Reform school.
So dox means exactly what? The dox root or part?
The I don't know if it's Greek or Latin. Dox is I don't know. Paul, how's your?
Like hetero
no,
means
okay.
More than one, right? And ortho would mean like one. So one.
I
like
think it's
way,
belief. Rule? I want to say belief, or maybe rule. I don't know. I don't
Okay,
know the
sorry.
etymology.
Thought that
I'll
might
look it
help
up.
me see this.
That's a good question to look up later. Um, I don't know. Conservative Judaism is also falls under this category. Reconstructionist, renewal, possibly humanist. I put a question mark there, and you'll see why on the next slide. Neo-Hasidic, etc. And then on the Orthodox side, you have modern Orthodox, Yeshivish, Haredi, Hasidic, Chabad, Breslov, Open Orthodoxy, etc. The major distinction, what makes something heterodox or orthodox, has to do with the approach to halakha, the approach to Jewish law. All Orthodox Jews, and many varieties, could, a modern Orthodox Jew you might see walking down the street might be dressed very much as I am right now, in short sleeve shirt with a colorful kippah, and otherwise modern contemporary dress. On the other hand, you might see a Haredi Jew walking down the street, very distinctive in black hat with big curly payas, uh, high white socks pulled up, over the pants. Um, they might have very different approaches to their day-to-day life, but all Orthodox Jews share a philosophy that Jewish law, halakha, never changes, that it is fixed and it cannot change, that the only halakha we have is what we've received from past generations, and that can never be changed or reinterpreted. Now keep in mind, Orthodox Judaism does change and reinterpret the law. That's why, believe it or not, there are no rules in the Torah about electric lights. But Orthodox Jews will not use electric lights on Shabbat because of the laws related to fire or building something complete. We'll talk about that when we talk about halakha more in depth. But the belief that there can be no innovation, even though in reality there is innovation, you've got to keep that in the back of your head, these two contradicting ideas. That is the fundamental belief of Orthodoxy, that there can be no innovation in Jewish law. Other areas of Jewish life can have innovation, depending on, according to some of these groups. According to other groups, even innovation in your day-to-day life should be limited or eliminated. On the other hand, all heterodox Jews believe that Judaism is fundamentally a reflection of its time. That the Judaism that existed in the time of the prophets was a reflection of the lives of the people at that time of the prophets. The Judaism that existed at the time of the Talmud was a reflection of the lives of the people who lived during the Talmud. That the Judaism which exists today is a reflection of the lives of people who live today.
So the law should evolve to reflect the times.
That the law, yes, you could say that. I wouldn't put it exactly like that, but you're not wrong. I would be splitting hairs if I disagreed.
Or maybe not should, but do. But the laws sometimes do.
That Jewish law is not the center of Judaism. There are other, there is Judaism beyond halakha. We all agree on that. Orthodox, conservative, whatever, yeshivish. We all agree that halakha is not the entire Judaism. Well, I don't know. There might be some Orthodox Jews who disagree with that statement. But, that role that Jewish law plays in Judaism, if it is fundamental and immutable. Do you know the word immutable? Cannot change. Uh, that's the defining feature of Orthodox Judaism. Now, underneath this line that you've drawn down the middle, or off to the side or on the back of the page, you can make another category, which is non-Jewish. These are Jewish adjacent things that have some aspect that looks Jewish, but that are not part of Judaism. So you may have heard of Messianic Judaism. These are Christians. They believe that Jesus was Christ. Jesus was the Savior, the Son of God. But they adopt certain Jewish practices in their life. It is a form of Christianity and therefore is not Jewish. Hebrew Israelites, which are African Americans who identify with the Jewish story of slavery and redemption, and through this identification have adopted Jewish practices and Jewish identity. Remember I said there was a question mark up here for a reason? For humanist Jews, the humanist Judaism is based around the belief that Judaism need not have any specific stated belief about God, that Judaism does not need God to exist. You can be perfectly fine as a Jew without God. I put a question mark because it's debatable whether that is a Jewish perspective at all. Whether saying Judaism can exist without God, is that valid or not? That's debatable. They get a question mark. If they are Jewish, for sure they're on the heterodox category. And by the way, it is not just my way of being pedantic that these categories are a better way of looking at Judaism than conservative Orthodox Reform. It's also when you are out exploring the Jewish world, you see these groups naturally gravitating together. That you see a kinship between different Orthodox organizations and groups and synagogues. You see a kinship and partnership more naturally between different heterodox synagogues, groups, and organizations. It's a very thin line. It's not like a bright line. It's not like you can't cross. We have a lot of members here at our temple who go back and forth between the Reform Temple Emmanuel and the Chabad, which is under the category of Orthodox. If you ask Rabbi Asher, the Chabad rabbi, are you Orthodox? He'll give you, well, you would have to ask him what his answer would be. I doubt he would say, yes, I'm Orthodox. He would probably have a different way of answering that question. But for sure, they fall under that category of Judaism. Ashkenazi, Sephardic, Mizrahi, oh my. Judaism is not only divided into different groups based on belief, but it's also divided into different groups based on ethnic origin or heritage. Before Judaism was divided into heterodox and orthodox, before Judaism was divided into Reform, conservative, and orthodox, Judaism was divided regionally. Ashkenazi Jews Is this big enough to see? Can you guys read this?
Yes.
Ashkenazi is this blue area up at the top. Centered in Germany, defined by features like Yiddish, but also uh, common in France, in um, the Eastern Bloc. That's not the right term anymore. Um, Eastern European nations and former Soviet Union.
That's me. Belarus.
Belarus, yeah, exactly. That's my dad's side as well. Then there is Sephardic, which is centered in Spain and North Africa. Spain, Portugal, Morocco. There's also, you might notice this little pink dot up here towards Amsterdam, where a lot of Jews who were escaping the Inquisition
Mm-hmm.
left Spain and Portugal and came up here into Amsterdam.
Can I take a picture of this?
Yeah.
I do want to send this. I do want to send this.
I will also send this to you. And if you learned about Sephardic and Ashkenazi 20, 30, 40 years ago, the conversation probably ended there, but it's not so clear-cut a picture because we also have Mizrahi Jews, like those in Egypt and Libya, those in Mizrahi literally means Eastern, those in Persia, in Babylonia, that's Iraq and Iran, those in Syria. The Syrian Jewish community is where Maimonides went to study because that was the center of Judaism at his time. There's also these yellow areas, which are independent groupings. They're groups of Jews that are distinctive from any of these other groups, such as Beta Israel in Ethiopia, the famous Ethiopian Jews that were isolated for hundreds of years from the rest of the Jewish community. Now almost all of them are living in Israel. Very famously rescued during the Ethiopian Civil War in the very famous airlift, the Operation Magic Carpet, where Israel flew planes in under the radar, loaded them up with all of the escaping Ethiopian Jews, and brought them to Israel. Now their children and grandchildren are growing up in Israel, which is very different from the Abu Yudaya Jews in it's not Kenya. I forget, near Kenya, which have a totally different story. These were Jews that these were Africans who encountered Christian missionaries first, and then later learned about Judaism, and said, "Well, it seems like the Torah and the Old Testament has all the answers. Why do we need all of the New Testament?" And so they became Jewish, which is a totally different story from the Italkim, the Italian Jews, that have their own traditions and customs that go back even before Ashkenazi or Sephardic Jews. There were Jews living in Italy, in Rome, going back thousands of years to the time of the prophets, which is a totally different story from the three distinct groups of Indian Jews, or the Kaifeng Jews living in China. I don't know what's going on here. There we go. I'm deciding how much depth to get into here. There's more history that we can get into about how these different groups emerged, but I think we'll end that class here. If you're really a history wonk, you love history and you'd like to learn more, there are always adult education classes where we may well get into the differences between Judaism that have existed. The important message that I hope comes across is that the Jewish world now has many different denominations or divisions, even under one umbrella of Judaism, where we are all one people. And this has always been the case. If you look at the 17th, 18th, 19th century, it was divided regionally: Ashkenazi, Sephardic, Mizrahi, and other groups. If you go back before that to the 16th and 17th century, you had Hasidim and Misnagim, for the two different perspectives of Judaism. And you have the...
Are those rabbis?
Those, yes. This is these. So these are the two. Actually, they're in the. They're. I should flip them around. These are two leaders of the 17th century Judaism, when there was a division in Judaism between the Hasidim. These are the original rebels. They believed that Judaism was fundamentally a spiritual, joyous practice that eventually became Hasidic Judaism, including Chabad, which is one type of Hasidic Judaism, and many other groups as well. And the Misnagdim, which meant the opposition, the opposers who opposed Hasidic Judaism, who favored scholarly study, that Judaism was fundamentally intellectual, that the mission of Judaism was to refine our understanding of the world and God's will, that it was an intellectual pursuit, and they wrote many books. That was the center. And the fellow on top here is the Vilna Gaon. If you ever study the Talmud, you'll probably hear about Vilna Shas, which is the printed edition of the Talmud from Vilna based on the Vilna Gaon. This fellow here, who wrote his edition of the Talmud that was so accurate it became the authoritative version of the Talmud, to the point where even when we refer to the pages in the Talmud today, it's based on the system that came out of his Talmud. It's a specific printed edition. Now I'm really splitting hairs. The fellow on the bottom is the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Israel Ben Eliezer, who was the founder of this joyous, ecstatic, and mystical approach to Judaism. Present day Orthodoxy is sort of the descendant of this split that happened here. Um, anyway, I'll leave it at that. Um, we'll skip. This is important. All right. In the 17th and 18th century, we had what was called the modern crisis in Judaism. So this followed the division of Hasidim and Misnagim. In Hebrew, it's called Haskalah. This will be we will finish by 8:30. I've got 4 minutes. I'll talk fast. Haskalah is the Jewish Enlightenment. When we entered the modern world, we were faced with a fundamental way of revisiting the question, what is Judaism? Before modern times, we knew what Judaism was because we were in the shtetl, we were in these little towns and communities where everyone you knew was Jewish. If you were a merchant, maybe you interacted on occasion with non-Jews, but most of your life, if you're living in a Jewish community, you're only interacting with other Jews, and that's it. You don't have to ask what is a Jew and what is not. As the walls of the shtetl came down, literally and metaphorically, all of a sudden you're interacting on a day-to-day basis with other people who are not Jewish, with other ideas. And so the question became, what is Judaism? Is Judaism a religion, a faith? Is it a people? Or is it a way of life? And the 3 different answers to this question, which, as it turned out, modern life sort of made mutually exclusive. Before the modern world, it was very easy to say Judaism is all of these at the same time. With the modern world, these became mutually exclusive in the sense that you could have any 2, but not all 3 in the modern world. For those who said Judaism is primarily a religion, that's the beginning of the Reform movement. Said, Judaism is not about being a nation or a people. It's not about speaking our Jewish language. It's not about living in Jewish places. It's about the relationship that we have with God. It's about faith. It's a religion. That became Reform Judaism. For those that said Judaism is fundamentally a way of life, Judaism has these rules, the halakha, that you follow. We do it the same way that our grandfather and great-grandfather did it. And that's what Judaism is about, is preserving our Jewish way of life and practice. Tradition. Exactly. That is the beginning of the Orthodox movement. For those who said Judaism is primarily about a peoplehood, it's about a culture and a language and being together as one people, that was the beginning of Zionism, which is the movement that led to establishing the State of Israel. They said, Judaism, if you want to have a religion, if you want to have, follow the halakha, that's fine, but first it's got to be about all of us being together as one people in one place, in our land, with our language, and that was the basis of Zionism. All 3 of these were fundamentally divergent. Modern life made it necessary for for people to pick a side, so to speak. The common narrative that you might hear is that, well, Orthodoxy was the original and these other things branched off. No, Orthodoxy was itself a branch based on the reality of modern life. These are some of I'm not going to go through these, but these are some of the different
Where the views split.
different views, right. These are the different topics where different groups of Jews have a different perspective from one another. So your answer to these questions: what is your approach to Jewish law, halakha? What is your approach to the role of women? Women in the synagogue and also women in the home. If you believe women should be have a special role in the temple, but in outside of the temple have their own lives, you might be modern Orthodox. Women are the same as men outside of the synagogue, but they have a special role that's separate from men inside the synagogue. That might be modern Orthodox. If you believe women and men have fundamentally separate roles, whether it's in the synagogue or in the home, then you might be Haredi or Hasidic. Ask Rabbi Asher's wife. If you believe that mysticism is a fundamental piece of your Judaism, you might be a Neo-Hasid, which are Jews that embrace mysticism and Kabbalah, but not necessarily the Orthodox approach to halakha. Or you might be Hasidic Jewish. These are many different ways that different people might approach Judaism.
I didn't realize angels was like a differing perspective type thing. So, like in Shalom Aleichem, it's like about angels, isn't it?
Yeah, Shalom Aleichem. Every Shabbat we sing about angels coming down. Many Reformed congregations, they leave it out. This idea of angels. We could do a whole class on different Jewish ideas about angels and how concerned we should be with angels. But we're out of time. I'm going to end it here for this week. We will join back next week when our topic will be something else, whatever I said it was going to be.
It's in the email, right? You're welcome.
Which is in the email. Paul, would you like me to send you a copy of the course outline?